Welcome to another episode of Come Together. And we're live. Bro, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate this. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me, man.
Dude, so our buddy Guy Levy, I saw you on his Instagram story. That he had just either trained with you or adjusted you. And I went to your Instagram page and I was like, this guy looks so fucking cool. I want to do a podcast with him. So I hit up Guy and I'm like, yo, who's that dude you know? And then he was like, yeah, he's awesome. You'd love him. Let me set up the introduction. And your life seems awesome, man. It seems like you're pursuing all your passions and you're kind of making them happen. You want to tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, man. Well, thank you for that. It's truly a blessing to be able to, accomplish and fulfill my dreams and live, the life that I've been dreaming as a child. But yeah, no, everybody in my family are aviators, so it was kind of in my blood to be a pilot. It was just second nature to me to do everything that has to do with flying. And, going through flight school and everything, it was just so, like, when you have a smart person in class and you're like, how do you understand everything so easily? That's kind of like how I felt in flight school. Of course, I had my challenges and everything, but it was just that one natural thing that I'm like, wow, this is like so cool to be experiencing. And, I never really thought about it in terms of, like, this is the best job in the world. It was just something I was so passionate about until I finally got on the airplane. And I at this stage in my career now, I'm like, damn, this is the best job in the world. Like, for me, at least,
Sure.
And that's basically why I can say, like, at least career wise, I'm living my dream on that. So, but it started off when I was very little and just seeing my dad leave, like, for flights and things like that. Back in the day, in the early 90s, he was able to take me in the flight deck in an international airline that he flew for. So that's when the real passion, like, sunk in. I was like, damn, what all these buttons do? Like, why is there so many lights? And just, like, aviation back then was just way different, way different than what it is now. And yeah, man,
How
that
so?
kind of, like, well, in terms of, like, technology, like, my dad was flying an airplane at the time where you needed three pilots in the cockpit. So you needed a captain, a first officer, and a flight engineer. Nowadays, there's no more flight engineers, so a lot of that stuff on that panel that the flight engineer used to do, like switch electrical components, pneumatic air, and where is it going, where is it coming from, all that stuff now can be handled with two pilots based on the design of the flight deck. So
Cool.
it's a little bit different nowadays, and the technology is just absolutely insane with how airplanes operate now and the redundant systems that they have. It's really fascinating.
I'm excited to hear all about this stuff. When did so your dad was a commercial pilot, international
Yeah,
commercial pilot?
yep,
He
he's
still
still an
flies?
airline pilot.
Nice. Okay,
Yeah, he's
gotcha.
got a
And
couple more
what did
months.
he say when you decided to go into it?
Well, my dad first originally was like, "Hey, are you sure you want to do this? Because this job, you're away a lot from your family. You're gonna miss birthdays. You're gonna miss Christmases. You're gonna miss a lot of these important things.
Hmm.
And I just want you to have all the details before you make this decision." He was like, "Are
Right.
you sure you don't want to be like an engineer or something?" And I did. I tried to do engineering, but I always wanted to be a pilot. I tried engineering as a backup, just in
Hmm.
case I didn't really like the lifestyle of being a pilot, which yeah, there was no way I was going to do engineering. Like, it's very interesting, but being a pilot, I think, is way better.
Totally. What's the schooling like? I have a friend of mine that I have a couple of friends actually that got their pilot's license, but I know there's different degrees of licenses, and I know it's a
Yes.
fortune, right? Like, I mean, it's like at least it was my friend after undergrad and his master's. I think he went back to Chicago. He's from Skokie, and it took him like 2.5, 3 years because he's paying out of pocket and and getting those flight hours. Apparently, like, to rent those little planes, it was very expensive. And he said he loved it more than anything in the world. But he was like, it's like you have to be committed to wanting to do that because it takes time and it takes a lot of money.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. There's a couple ways you can go about flight school. You can go to a mom and pop school. You can go through a university, In reality, the licenses don't take you that long. If you go through a university, you're gonna do your full 4 years and come out with a bachelor's of like aviation science. But that
Cool. Is that
doesn't
what you
mean it
did?
takes you. No, no, no. I went to a mom and pop school. I did it in about like ten months. But
Nice.
to your point, where you're saying is like you have to go consistently, because if you don't, then you start losing like what you learned. So if you only go once a week, you're gonna have to repeat that over and over and over again. What might have taken you a week to learn now is going to take you 2 months to learn, because you're not going so frequently. And back then there weren't as many aids financially for flight school as there is now, and that is due to a lot of like the demand, especially that the industry needs right now of pilots. So certain airlines have created like their own flight school path program to their airline. So they offer the
Mhm.
financial loan in the aspect of it at a lower interest rate than would be a regular personal loan. And that's made it a little bit easier for people to be able to start flight school. Um, but before that started maybe like 5-6 years ago. Before that, when I went to flight school, there wasn't any of that. So your loan was at a personal loan rate, and that is
Wow.
super high.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I had when I was growing up, I did a lot of savings, and I was, working since I was like 14, 15, and I saved a lot of money because I knew that that's something that I wanted to do. My two main goals with saving money was to go to flight school and buy a house. So every time I would save, I'd dump it all in flight school and continue. And I was still working part-time. I went to FIU for business administration, and I was doing my flight school at the same time, and I was working valet parking. So I was trying to pay everything as I go. All my savings went into flight school. I went from zero, started into an airline, started saving again, and then was finally able to buy a house. So I was able to fulfill those two objectives of my savings. So
That's
yeah.
amazing. Where'd you buy your house? Where's your house?
It's here in South Florida.
South Florida. Cool,
Yeah, man,
man.
I love it down here. I grew up here, and I just love it. It's all my friends, family, primarily everybody's here.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I've been in South Florida for about 3 years now. I've always wanted. Growing up, my dad is originally from Miami Beach, and
Okay.
I always said going. And we used to visit a bunch. My grandparents still live there,
Yeah.
and I used to always say I got to try it out. And my wife and I got married. I was working remote, and she wasn't sure what she was going to do with herself yet. She's an ultrasound tech now,
Mm.
but we were like, we could go anywhere in the world, and we're both from New York. And we're like,
Okay.
let's head to Florida. So we just, like right after a week after our wedding, we just loaded up our car with whatever clothes we had, and we just drove down and figured it out.
Damn, spontaneous. I love that.
Yeah,
Nice.
it's not. It's. I mean, I we. It was cool, and I've already moved, so like probably 5 or 6 different times in my life to completely
Hmm.
unknown places that, I knew that South Florida was something that, is pretty manageable as far as lifestyle.
Yeah.
I love being down here. So you were working in school, um, and what you're saving the money that you were making at this point, and you started working at 14, you said?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I
That's
know.
crazy. Did your family encourage it? You said you just knew that you had to, and like how were you so driven at that age?
Man, that's a really good question. It was all like initiated by me. I was telling my parents like, "Hey, I want to work. I want to make my own." Like I wanted to be as independent as I could from as young as I could. Um, and nothing that doesn't influence the relationship with my parents or anything. They were always very supportive of what I
Sure.
would try to do, but I always wanted to be like, hey, I don't really want to be using your money. I want to make my own money. And then my first job was working at the YMCA, taking care of like kids while their parents went to go work out.
Hmm.
And I made some really good friendships there. I actually met one of the first initial personal trainers, or the person who helped me train, introduced me to fitness through that. And it all just like went from there. I went to work at a different gym after that, and then I ended up working for who is now Tony Robbins' personal trainer, like things like
Cool.
that. It just that whole wanting to work. I've always had like really great work ethic. My parents were always like, no, you need to focus on school, and of course I definitely needed to, but I just always thought I can handle both, and I did. But yeah, a lot of that self driven
That's
to
awesome.
start making money. Yeah,
That's awesome. Can I ask how many siblings you have?
one
You
younger
have one
sister.
sibling, younger
Yeah,
sister. Gotcha, gotcha,
yeah.
gotcha. So do you feel? So do you feel like you're like the protective one, or like like you kind of had to like be your own man and make your own way? Because that's what I kind of like. I'm the oldest too. I mean, I'm the oldest of like six, but I've always felt like as an older sibling. Also, I kind of felt that similar guilt, although I probably started feeling it a little like probably closer to 17 or 18. Like hey, like maybe everything I do shouldn't be in my parents' time, and
Yeah.
maybe it's time to start kind of building my own skill set and kind of doing my own thing and like really making my own way. But I always felt that kind of leadership or sense of responsibility just from being an older sibling.
Yeah, no, that's a really great observation. I never really felt it from a sibling's perspective, just because I knew that like, my parents would be able to support my sister and I in whatever education we wanted to pursue or something like that. And, having the possibilities to live in the United States and the amount of possibilities that there is here is something that I wasn't really too much, I guess, felt pressured by to initiate my own building of skill sets.
Right.
But yeah, my sister was the same. She was like, "Hey, I want to start building my own skill set," but she focused a lot more on the education part. She's in the health industry, so she spent a lot of her time studying and studying real hard. You know how that
Mhm.
industry is. Everybody there is
Yeah.
just studying night and day. So so yeah, man. I think it's a really good observation, but maybe I gotta give it some more thought and see if that influenced a little bit. Yeah,
Maybe. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You never know what you discover. So you got
exactly.
so you're super so you're into you're into flying, you're into fitness. You started working out, you started, I guess getting introduced to this at 14, 15, which is probably one of the best things you could do at that point in your life.
Yeah.
I see that you fight. I saw that you're one year away from your black belt.
Yes.
In which
Yeah.
martial art?
It's actually in Krav Maga.
Nice.
The school is a mixed martial arts school, but the main self defense that we learn is Krav Maga.
Gotcha. Yeah, I just started rolling jujitsu a couple months ago. Guy,
Nice.
also, like I did a podcast. I did my podcast with Guy.
Yeah.
I told him that I wanted to start because I heard that he did MMA,
Hmm.
and he was like, "Dude, you got to come to where I work. They have an awesome gym, and the guy and the coaches there are awesome." And I was, I mean, I'm almost 30.
Yeah.
To start this for the first time when you're almost 30 was pretty terrifying, but it was the best thing in the entire world, man. Like just getting that adrenaline and kind of like facing that, that fear of confrontation, but
Yeah.
also kind of learning in real time how to slow everything down and to just, think about your individual body parts and components and after doing that, I've kind of felt that I've had a much easier time in the last couple of months, even with sales and work and business and even my own personal life, like my relationship with my wife and like my kids. You kind of look for your own ways to solve issues because you're spending so much time with no one there to help you except for yourself, and
Yeah.
this person that's sitting on top of you that knows way more than you do about anything, and it encourages you to figure out how to ask questions and how to learn and how to figure out when you're in a tough spot and you're thinking of quitting, what else can you do, and it's kind of a mindset. I feel like it translates over to everything that you do.
I agree. That was beautifully said, man. And it's just like you can transition what you learn on from martial arts into real life, just like how you said. It improves a lot of your ability to think of being resourceful, right?
Hmm.
Just like how you said, if you're in a situation where you're stuck, like I started jujitsu as well in a separate gym. And there's times where I'm like, oh man, I don't know how to get out of this. If I just give up, what's going to come out of that? But if you start thinking, you slow down your breathing, you slow down everything, and you're like, okay, I have a little bit of time, even though I'm super tired, I'm exhausted. Do I have about a second or two to think, how can I get out of this? Even if it's just probably not the right way to do it, you still do it. And that is teaching you, hey, still try, attempt to do
Yeah.
something because you never know what else it can lead you to.
Yeah.
Maybe that movement gets that person out of the perfect situation to get you in some sort of choke or everything. Now you have space, right?
Yeah.
And that little amount of space is enough for you to throw the other person off or get out. And it's just like that. Like mentally, every day we go through things that we're constantly thinking about. We're overloaded with information daily. And we just get to a point where we're like, oh shit, I can't even think straight right now for something that it really matters. And that's when you really have to focus and be like, shit,
Right.
this does matter. And
Yeah.
that's the same situation when you're like pinned down. How do I get out? Mentally, it's the same thing. You know what I'm saying? So it teaches you that. And I think it's fantastic. That's what I love about martial arts.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that one of the points you just said, I think that is really, really valuable is when you're stuck to give yourself a second to breathe and to not like that second of like that sec like one thing that someone was teaching me the other day. I went back and I had like you were talking even about like with flight school, I have muscle memory, and the more time you spend practicing, the more that it really becomes ingrained in you. I've done this. I've done jujitsu for like a month and change, and I went on a 2 week break, which is the
Hmm.
worst thing to do. I come back, and I just felt like my entire body was just out of sorts, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I was totally disconnected. And I'm talking to, I'm asking a guy that's obviously, phenomenal, way better than I am.
yeah.
And we're rolling, and he goes, "Oh, so what are you gonna, what could I do?" He's like, "Dude, you're rushing everything." He's like,
Hmm.
"One step at a time. There's no rush. If you're in a fight, like." Think just like like be aware like like I like your instinct is like to like flood your brain like just to like rush at something or to like
Right.
move as fast as you can. And I've actually noticed that, that's with a lot of things. I noticed also I'm a huge music fan, right?
Hmm.
And some of the best singers and some of the best covers and some of the best songs that I've heard performed are just done slowly. And then and then when someone's nervous, I don't know if when someone's nervous, they speed up what they're saying. They talk
Yeah,
faster, they sing faster, they play faster. There's something to be said about the art of just slowing everything down. And that's
yeah.
what breathing helps, I guess. But but if you can when you start implementing that into one part of your life, like with training or rolling, and then you start and then you move on and you go back to your house, and you gotta again, this happens to me all the time. I get work calls from upset customers. I sell medical equipment, right?
Hmm.
And if they're upset, my initial reaction is to panic. Like, and I'm like, dude, what are you panicking for? They're probably just as nervous to be confronting you as you are dealing
Yeah.
with them. Just take a breath, have a conversation with them, show them you understand what they're thinking, show them you understand where they're coming from, and see how you go work it out. And
Right.
like,
Right.
and every single time I've done that since then, and this is just something that I've learned from rolling. Every single time I've done that since then, it's really, really changed the dynamic of my, in terms of my ability to be a salesman and like a businessman.
Yeah, and don't you find that in that moment where you are in that situation, it actually, instead of becoming more stressful, it becomes more enjoyable because you have a
Yeah.
different outlook on it, right? I think if you can enjoy those certain times in your job, it makes the quality of time in your job a whole lot better. Would you agree with that? Or
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, imagine. I mean, if your entire job is afraid to answer the phone because you don't know what the other person on the other end of the phone is going to be saying to you, that's a pretty miserable way to live.
yeah,
If you answer the phone like you're collaborating with someone, it's a totally different experience,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that's like that with everything in life, like even like most conflicts I've realized are just are just people trying to emphasize their points and feel like they're not heard. Like that's like
mhm,
95% of the conflicts that I personal, business, whatever. It's like if you like, I've noticed that if I just tell people, like if I'm able to repeat to them what their concern is and say I totally understand where you're coming from, and I'm and this and this, and here's where I'm coming from. That's why I said what I said, or I did what I did, and I'm sorry about the miscommunication. There's nothing there. There's nothing there to argue with, like, and then
yeah.
it just turns into collaboration. I think it's awesome. So tell me, dude, a little bit about so you finished flight school, and you've been flying for how long you been flying for now?
Let's see, 8 years now,
8 years
since
now.
2014. Yeah.
And do you have a commercial license? Do you have what kind of planes do you fly?
Yeah, so I have what's called an airline transport pilot license, And that's basically after you're commercial and you have built enough hours to qualify for this license, you can fly for airlines pretty much.
Cool. Do
So
you?
I fly, yeah, I fly for American Airlines, and I am on the Boeing 737.
No way. Really?
Yeah.
737 is international? That's the one that they take internationally?
We do some international. So my routes primarily are Caribbean,
Hmm.
South America, and Central America. South America, we don't go so deep. The lowest or the most south that we go is probably like Quito or Guayaquil in Ecuador. But we
Hmm.
do a lot of Colombia. We do a lot of Central America, like Guatemala, Costa Rica, Panama, Honduras, El Salvador. On the Caribbean
Wow.
side, we go to almost every island that there is in the Caribbean. And then we do a lot of domestic stuff. That plane carries about 172 passengers, depending on the configuration that we have. We have the NG and also the MAX, the 737 MAX. So either one, the MAX has a little bit more range and is also a lot more fuel efficient. So most of the time that we go south towards
Hmm.
Ecuador, we normally take the MAX. And the next step up after that, the one that goes like really far east or west, is you're looking at the Boeing 777 or the 787. That's on the Boeing side. Our airline only has those in terms of like what we call wide body aircraft, but Airbus also has what's called wide body aircraft, and you'll see a lot of them being used by like Delta and United as well. And they're the Airbus A350, the Airbus A330. Those are wide body aircraft too that do that long range kind of flying as well.
Right, right, right. But so what's the new Dreamliner? Like I just flew to Israel and Amsterdam
Okay.
and I mean obvious listen, I get a little nervous flying. I've obviously noticed that the bigger plane you fly, the less turbulence that you experience. But I've also heard that turbulence is not necessarily a bad thing. My friend that was the pilot was telling me that a lot of times pilots fly into turbulence on purpose. Is that true?
Um, I don't know if that's true that we fly into
No.
turbulence on purpose. I mean, honestly, I'd rather not. I'm trying to have smooth air for the comfort of everyone, right? But there are times where it's pretty much like you are unable because the air is so disrupted that where we're flying in. You got to remember, like up at altitude, there's a lot of things that affect air in the transition of a flight. So when you take off, you're going
So what
from air
does? What
that's
affects it?
a lot of things. So wind affects it, pressure affects it, fronts. It's either a low pressure area or high pressure area. Cold fronts, warm fronts. Then you have winds. Where the wind's coming from? If during the winter you have jet streams, like all of these things that push air in different directions as you're moving cause turbulence. So turbulence is literally just the like not smooth airflow over the wings. The air becomes turbulent. It breaks up. It's in different directions. So what happens is over the wings, the air's not smooth. It just starts to kind of break apart a little bit earlier than expected on a certain part of the wing. And what happens with that? That's where you start feeling like a little bit of like shaking, and sometimes you'll feel like a kind of like a big drop. Those are like pockets of turbulence that you might get, but in reality, turbulence is not. There's different categories of turbulence. You have light, moderate, severe, and you obviously don't want to go through severe. But if you're going through a light turbulence, that's that's nothing that bad. Airplanes are designed to sustain loads of extreme turbulence and some, you
Right.
know. So what the scary feeling is the acceleration your body's going through from being in one certain area moving through space to changing the direction to dropping low or raising up or moving left to right. That doesn't feel good in the body for some people.
Right.
And that's what's kind of scary, right? That sends a message to your brain saying like, oh shoot, what's going on? Like that's not what we were feeling right now.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Like, I don't know if you've ever gotten in like go-karting or you've gone like in a really fast car around a track. The acceleration and the braking it doesn't make you feel good initially. There's just
Right.
so much difference of acceleration. It's almost kind of like the same thing. But my question to you is, why do you think that it's better to fly in bigger planes than in smaller planes? Because to me, that's just a mental thing that people create in their head, that the bigger that the airplane is, that the less turbulence they're going to feel. Is that what you
So
think?
well, yeah. I'm kind of basing that on. I have a yeah. I'm basing that on experience. So it's actually funny. So there's two. I guess there's a couple of things that I'm immediately was thinking of. Right. Number
Mm-hmm.
one is I've flown on a private plane once before, from New York to Vegas,
Mm-hmm.
and and we had a lot more turbulence on that little plane than than I've had, for example, again, taking that Dreamliner to across the country to across the ocean to Israel or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, on the other hand, I also know I also had I didn't know this for a fact, but I kind of put it together that temperature has a big impact, because I know that every time I'd fly back and forth from South Florida, especially in the summertime, the ten it- you know as I guess the humidity and the heat, and also I feel like because the heat in Florida is always, it almost feels like it's always about to like break. Like it's always like building and building and building, and it doesn't completely break until like winter again, I guess, until like October, November. But like when you're like every single day, the heat humidity and the heat kind of build up and build up and build up, and I think and I guess that causes an impact in the environment, right? Like, or I guess in the air. Um, but I just assume that the bigger the plane, the more sturdy, and that even though and I guess the more weight there is, the less thrown around it's going to get. That's kind of what I figured.
First of all, you're 100% correct about the temperature. It does affect. So whenever you're getting into warmer temperatures and there's lower pressures, there is instability of air, right? Instability of air meaning like the air is just not staying. The air is starting to move up in altitude. Why? Because there's less pressure, and whenever there's less pressure, particles start to move up. And then when particles move up, they start to lose the temperature. The temperature starts to drop. And what happens is those particles become a little bit more dense again. And then they go through the cycle that they're moving up and down in between altitudes. And that's how you start getting like unstable air and the buildup of storms. So imagine you're flying straight horizontally, right? You're flying straight and you're about to pass this area where there's low pressure, and this air is moving up and down and you're moving horizontally.
Hmm.
So that air that you're moving horizontally with is now disrupted
So
because
interesting.
you're now going through an area of air moving up and down. It's
Right.
unstable. So
Right.
that's just one of the many reasons there could be turbulence. Let's say you're flying on that flight that you were going from I don't know if it was New York or Miami to Vegas. As you're getting closer to those mountains, air is disrupted by those mountains, right? There's a lot of airflow that comes from the northwest and comes down and drops towards the southeast.
Hmm.
If you have opposing winds for that day for some reason that are going against it, let's say like a a warm front is coming up and it's hitting that high pressure cold front that's coming in, you have two pieces of massive air colliding against each other. That air is not going to be smooth. It's just like opposing each other. It's just hitting each other
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that. So now you're here coming along. It's nice and smooth. And then bam, you get this like huge shake in the airplane. It's because the airflow was disrupted. So if you take it, you can't really compare size of an airplane in terms of like I took an airplane once through this route and it was small and I got a lot of turbulence, and then I went the other route and it was big, I got no turbulence, because there's so many outside factors that affect what makes an airplane go through turbulence. Because if you took that same Dreamliner that you took to Israel and you go to Vegas on that same day, that's exact same flight, you're going to feel the same exact turbulence.
Oh yeah.
Maybe it'll be the feeling might be different, because yes, size and stability does affect how much is felt by the airplane, but every airplane is built on three different types of stability. You have longitudinal stability, lateral stability, and vertical stability. That means that if the airplane is flying along nice and smooth and it gets disrupted, its ability to return back to that neutral position that's what airplanes are built on. There has to be a
Right.
certain degree for airplanes to come back to neutral without touching it. It'll take some time, but without touching it, it'll come back. Obviously, if you do manipulate the controls and bring it back to neutral earlier, it's obviously better, but the autopilot does that as well.
I never thought of air as like a thing, like as like an
Yeah.
object, it's just, it's so cool to think about, because it's true, and I mean, and even just the difference, by the way, and I'm sure you've experienced this as you travel. The difference between the air in different locations is just
Yeah.
out of this world, dude. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm in my parents' house right now in about an hour north of Manhattan, and and even though it's hot, like the air in the mountains is just completely, excuse me, different air than in South Florida.
Yep.
And it's just a different world. And and I guess I never really thought of it, but it's a legitimate like medium. Like it's really really cool. Are you um are you nervous about AI taking over all pilot jobs? Because I
Hell
feel
no.
like I keep you're not nervous?
Nah, I don't think so. They actually just came out. They were trying to do this whole thing in Europe where they're trying to size it down to one pilot. And to me, I think that's completely stupid because there's still a lot of things that with AI and with technology right now,
Mhm.
you still cannot do what two pilots can do in the airplane.
So can you break that
It
down?
well, it
Like
kind of really
yeah.
depends. I'm not quite sure exactly. Well, first, in terms of you got to think about this. Like you got to think about the human aspect and the instinct and perspective on a situation versus a robot just doing things based on what it's programmed to do. Right?
Right.
The robot, if something wrong happens, the AI will, go through like, okay, if this is wrong, then that's going to happen. If this is going to happen, right? But there's the element of human
Instincts.
interaction and
Yes.
perspective.
Right.
An airplane can be like, oh, I lost both engines, right?
Hmm.
The AI computer will be like, okay, we need to shut down. We need to do a complete shutdown, and we're going to glide it and land into the ocean.
Okay.
If you have there was an I think it was Transat. It was a Canadian airline that went from Canada all the way to, I believe it was going to Portugal, and it made a landing in the Azores. Why? Because let me see if I can remember this correctly. They started having fuel issues in one engine, and the checklist, they didn't do something according exactly to the checklist. The way that the outcome came down to intuition of the pilots and just flying experience that they were able to land an airplane without engines safely in an island on the runway. Okay, like it's a miracle, but
Yeah.
it, artificial intelligence could have been different, and it could have been like, hey, we need to shut down both engines because this is what your checklist does, and we're gonna have to ditch in the middle of the ocean, and who knows how long it's gonna take for rescue to get there. Could have been casualties, right? That element, AI could not, at least to this
Improvise.
day, cannot do that. There's no way.
Right. Right.
So,
Right. I got. So you're
but in
saying that
terms
the
of
human, but I mean, but you could really wind down a lot of the repetitive stuff, right? Like what you said, like flying has changed a lot, especially since your dad has been flying.
yeah,
And I'm sure there's a lot less that pilots need to do nowadays than they needed to do 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And I'm sure in 5, 10, 15 years, it's going to be different too, no?
for sure, I completely agree. The technology is to help the pilots stay focused on not dealing with tasks that take you away from flying the airplane. Because
Okay.
unfortunately, that's how a lot of aerial accidents have happened in the past. Pilots got distracted on things that had not that they didn't have anything to do with flying, but they were aside from being focused on flying, right?
So what is there to focus on if you're a pilot, right? And you're there, what are your like what's the order of priorities in terms of your responsibilities as a pilot, in terms of flying, navigating, engineering, whatever it is. Like what are you expected to do? What's computerized, what's not?
Sure.
How does that work?
The primary is the saying that goes aviate, navigate, communicate. So you fly the airplane first. Something goes wrong, right? Let's say you're like at cruise or something like that. You guys are chilling, you and the other pilot are talking. Something goes wrong. The first thing that you have to do is fly the airplane because if you don't fly the airplane, well, We don't want to know what happens after that. Then you communicate. So you can communicate can be anything in between, like checklist usage, communication between the two pilots, communication with air traffic control, and then navigate. Finally, after that, you want to be able to navigate and, okay, what is the course of action that we're going to do now? Are we going to divert? Are we going to go to this or are we going to go to that? That level, so it sounds very easy when I talk about it because we're just at cruise at 37,000 feet. But let's say something happens when you're lower and you're flying, like for example for us when we go to Quito, those mountaintops are about 14 to 15,000 feet. Now you're in a situation where aviate, navigate, and communicate have to happen like this, right? Has to happen quick, because if you take a long time to navigate, to get to the navigation part, you might go into a mountain, right? But it's not that it's like, we're just flying blind and we're just like something happens and we're just flying and we're going towards the mountain peak. No, like there are routes that are predetermined already in our flight plan, which we will already be on. It just, there's so many different scenarios. But what I'm trying to get at is that the pilot training is, let's say something happens when you're around 13,000, 14,000 feet around mountainous terrain, and then all of a sudden you have to aviate, navigate, communicate. That technology has helped us to focus on aviate, navigate, and then just being able to, okay, we assess the situation. We're going to where we need to go. Now let's talk to everyone. I think I said it wrong, man. I think I said aviate, communicate, and navigate. It's the other way. It's aviate, navigate, communicate. So you want to make sure you're flying the airplane, knowing where you're going, and then talk about it. So pilot training, especially in the airlines, is all about that. They put us in scenarios in a simulator where it's constantly like, this happens, how are you going to handle it? What are you going to do? And there's every airline has standard operating procedures. That is what helps both pilots stay exactly in line to complete that mission when something goes wrong, so that there's no miscommunication between the pilots, that there's no, like, we both know exactly what to do. And if technology didn't exist to help us with that, then one pilot will be busy trying to flip a bunch of switches while the other one's trying to fly the airplane. It gets overwhelming.
Right.
But pilots used to do it like that. And I think that's totally fucking badass. You know, like the fact that you can divert your attention to so many things and do it. But unfortunately, there have been a lot of accidents because of that. So that technology, that stuff has helped. I even think with like what you mentioned, 10 to 15 years from now, yeah, I think AI and I think technology is going to be even better. But I just don't think we will lose two pilots in the flight deck. I just think that we will be doing, for example, a flight that would take from New York to London 6 hours might take you now like 4 or 3. That's why I think technology
how does that
go.
work?
I mean, it's just technology.
Is that just speed of the plane? Engines, that's just how big the plane is? Yeah.
And no, in terms of like fuel efficiency for like engines of an airplane, how much powerful they can get, you know, what can engines do at higher altitudes to be able to, you know, produce more thrust or get us going to this stuff a lot faster. There's a trade-off, right? There's a trade-off because as you go up in altitude, you lose density of air. So it's a lot harder for jets or turbine engines to produce thrust with thinner air, right? You really have to compress that air to get thrust out of it. So yeah, technology has helped a lot with that and the fuel efficiency of it. But when you're up in the air and the air is less dense, you're actually moving through the air a lot faster. You have less drag. You have less particles of air that are slowing you down up at higher altitudes, right? So that's a great trade-off. But the other thing is, too, is now there's something called cosmic radiation. And it's when you're flying at higher latitudes. I believe it might be like 60 north or something like that. So basically a beam like, I don't know, somewhere in North Canada. A little bit right around there. If you're flying closer to the North Pole than that, you're exposed to radiation. That's cosmic radiation. It's not like the same as UV radiation, but it's just radiation that's there because you're not being protected so much by the atmosphere of the Earth. You have less
Right.
protection at those altitudes,
Yeah.
right? So that's another, like, one of the reasons why, I mean, they could possibly create an airplane that can go so much higher and so much faster so we can get to a destination a lot quicker. But now everybody's exposed to a lot of radiation. And two, the pressure. You got to think about, like, whenever the higher we go, the airplane has to maintain a pressure like if we were lower, right?
Right.
So typically you're flying up 30 something thousand feet, 40,000, and your cabin inside the airplane feels at max 8,000 feet in the air, right?
Cool.
There's a big pressure difference. I mean, that's like a lot of thousands of feet pressure difference. You have to build an airplane strong enough that it won't collapse because of the pressure difference. You see what I'm
Right.
saying? Or explode.
Yeah,
Either
sure.
one. So material of an airplane, technology-wise, is one thing. Engines of an airplane and how it performs is another thing that with technology and AI, I think could get better so that we could start doing longer flights faster.
But we have to be careful about the radiation.
Correct. You have to be careful about the radiation, but that's why, like, we won't, like, the airplanes don't have to go so high in altitude in order to achieve faster speeds. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So
Yeah.
so I think, there's a difference. There's regulations based on how much radiation can you fly through in a given amount of time.
Right.
And then
Right.
if the airline cannot program you to fly in those altitudes and those latitudes for more than XYZ numbers because it'll violate the
Totally.
law. Yeah.
Totally. By the way, what do you think? I mean, my understanding is also that, or my understanding is that underwater has experiences, or in the ocean, experiences similar levels of pressure in that kind of way. Do like submarines or like I guess marine type of technology do they collaborate with aviation at all because they face similar challenges in terms of having to design a thing, a boat or a plane that can
Yeah.
withstand all this pressure and create an environment of a different pressure within it. Is there collaboration between the two, or are they two totally different sciences?
Well, that's a great question. There might be to a certain extent, but it's the complete opposite. Because whenever you start going below water, the pressure is actually increasing. So as submarines go down, the water pressure and the pressure outside the submarine is so much greater. Like the submarine itself inside has to be able to not collapse like a Coke can, right?
Right.
But the people
So,
inside need to feel like if they were higher, like if they were almost
right.
at the surface, right?
So it's inverted.
It's inverted, exactly. So that's why I think there's not much of a collaboration, but there could be. I've never really even thought about that, nor investigated it. But I'm sure there's talks. And just because they're completely inverted doesn't mean that there's some overlapping information that each one can use.
That submarine that went down a couple of years ago. Remember that story? They were like trying to go down to the Titanic or whatever, and like
Yeah.
those guys must have died immediately, right? Because like anything that goes wrong, the pressure just like you said, cracks it in a Coke can.
Yeah, there's actually, I was just looking at through Netflix yesterday, and I added that documentary to my
Yeah,
list. Yeah, so
me too.
I'm
I
gonna
just
see it.
added
But
too.
I remember reading an article that it like fucking disintegrated or some shit. I can't remember exactly the words what it
Yeah,
was, but I mean,
but people
you're
were
talking
looking for
about
them. What's the point of looking for them?
right. It's so much pressure, man. Like deep inside. Like just think about this. When you go scuba diving, and I think it's like you do a depth of more than like 20 to 30 feet or something like that.
Yeah,
And obviously you have to go up controlled, whatever. You should not fly 24 to 48 hours after you go scuba diving after reaching a certain depth.
really.
Yes, because what that does to you in terms of like your body's still acclimating to pressure. And you think about it like biologically to the smallest extent, there's still pieces and parts of your body that have not acclimated to the new pressure, that it starts to build up like bubbles in your bloodstream, bubbles in your like areas where you're going to get a lot of pain in your joints. Call it the bends, right? So if you change that pressure drastically in less than like 24 to 48 hours, you're going to start feeling a lot of pain. That's why they always
Wow.
tell us They always tell us if you're gonna go scuba diving, don't like on overnights. We don't do any of that. We don't do any because it's dangerous. And when we're flying, actually, when I was going through my private pilot and commercial license, you're flying in airplanes that are unpressurized, so you're really feeling like whatever altitude that it is outside. And part of like the passenger checklist was to ask them if anybody has been scuba diving or anything in the past, because
Really?
now you can cause now they're not going to go and tell you. The passenger's not going to be like, hey man, yeah, I went scuba diving, it was awesome, cool. Like maybe they'll say it, but there's no way you're going to know unless they tell you. So now you're flying in the air and these people start feeling super uncomfortable because they didn't know about that. And yeah, it was something that we had to ask the passengers. But I'm assuming, I've never done any scuba diving lessons or anything like that before. In the course that they take, they probably tell them, don't go flying for 24 to 48 hours, I mean, you just never know. It's always better to ask and be safe than somebody start feeling bad and now you have to go somewhere else because somebody's having a bad time.
Yeah, definitely. What's is the party culture of of the airline industry overrated, over dramatized, or is it accurate, or
Like
what's been your
what you
experience with
see
that?
from shows and movies and stuff.
Yeah, 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 that's right.
Um,
Is it over dramatic? Because I feel like, listen, at the end of the day, especially if you're like just if you're a single person, and you're spending all this time traveling different places. I mean, I would probably be partying all the time, you know.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and look, there's nothing wrong with doing what you want to do as long as you are responsible and you're within the limits of the regulations, right? Um, Nowadays, the airline scheduling is so much tighter. And what
Hmm.
I mean by that is before, back in the day, you used to be able to do one flight, go somewhere, be there for like, I don't know, 24, 48, 36 hours, and then come
Yeah,
back.
yeah.
That was plenty of time for, to go and explore, do all the partying and everything that you wanted to do. I mean, it's part of the lifestyle, man. You go somewhere new to experience another state, another city, another country, something.
Hmm.
Nowadays, the technology for optimizing pilot schedules is, well, if there's these regulations of pilot rest, I want to be able to maximize the time that this pilot can fly per day
Hmm.
before we hit any sort of like fatigue risk.
Okay.
So what happens is now you have long days of flying where you're flying maybe 2 to 3 flights a day. You get to an overnight and it's only anywhere between 12, 16, or 24 hours.
That's
Man,
it.
after flying all day, right?
You don't want to go anywhere.
You're a little bit wiped out.
Yeah.
By the time you get to your hotel, by the time everyone meets up, you're only looking at a couple hours to do something.
Yeah.
The next day you may have an early show, or the next day you got in super late, so now you're going to bed at like 2, 3 in the morning. You're not going to wake up at 7 or something to go to the beach and things like that. You're going to try to get rest because you fly again the next day, 2 to 3 flights. They're trying to get
That sucks, man.
it does. It does. But to me, it's still the best job in the world. And, it's a job. We're getting paid. We're getting paid well. And while our overnights, not all of them, are 24 hours, you still have enough to be able to, I don't know, maybe get dinner with the crew somewhere. Or
Yeah.
maybe you do a breakfast with the crew before you go. It just really all depends. The funnest layovers, for me at least, have been in the Caribbean, where there's a lot of like, you're all on the beach. You're all doing like, it's all this beachy vibes and things. And I love that because you go out with the crew, get breakfast in the morning. Some of us will go get a workout in before we go fly. And boom, there goes our morning and afternoon, you know? So it is different. Don't get me wrong. People still do party, but there's also a lot of,
Sounds like it's hard to. It sounds like you have to put like a lot of work into it.
you
You have to
have,
like put work into finding time to party.
I mean, for real. Yeah, you do. But everybody like knows, hey, this is the regulation. This is where you have to be backed by. This is, you know, if you kind of cross that line, you're not only are you putting your job at risk, but you're putting people at risk. And
Yeah.
everyone knows that if you even come close to that, it's not worth any of the
Right.
repercussions that have to come with that.
Totally.
So, that being said, there's a good balance between how much you want to go explore and party and everything versus, hey, the professionalism of your job in what you do. And it's definitely changed a lot throughout the years.
I bet. I bet. But I mean, I can't imagine that everyone looks at it as professionally as you do. I mean, it sounds. I think you sound like you're thoughtful about it and you're mature about it. But I'm
Yeah,
sure
yeah,
listen, there are plenty of adults that are adult children. that, and I guess that obviously I guess the crew would be different than a pilot in terms of responsibilities.
right.
But how strictly enforced are all the regulations, especially when it comes to like, traveling or getting somewhere on time or drinking or not or whatever it is. How I what are there random tests or
Yes.
what's yeah, there are.
Yep. There's random tests. At random, people or pilots and flight attendants can be uh, tested for alcohol or drugs at any point, anytime, anywhere. There's also like
Do they do it
everything.
often?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there's so many people in the airline
Yeah.
though that it's often without how many people there are, but each individual person, you just never know when you're going to get it. There could be a time where you get it like, oh wow, I only got it like a couple months ago, and sometimes it could be a year or two before you get one
Wow.
again. It's so random. It's so random. I honestly don't know how the algorithm works for that. If it's a computer, or if it's like chosen by certain people. Um, but it's the policy and the regulation is a little bit different. The regulation is one thing. The policy that we do can amend that regulation. So for us, it's actually a little bit more restrictive. It's 12 hours before you can have any alcohol and you touch an airplane, or I think it's like 0.004 or something like that. It's something that like if you have one beer within 12 hours, it'll show up.
Really?
Yeah. So
Wow.
so something like that. I mean, I don't even do that because I don't even come close to that limit. Why would I want to come close to that 12-hour limit, If
No,
if the
definitely
if
not.
the layover is long enough, 36 hours, cool. That gives me plenty of time to not have any of that, right?
Yeah.
Um but yeah, there are random tests. There are regulations in terms of alcohol percentage in your blood. There's in terms of time, and also when it comes to an investigation or something like that, there's cameras everywhere, man. And airlines
Yeah.
have access to cameras in hotels and everything. So you're kind of almost like being watched,
Oh yeah.
you
Big
know?
brother.
Yeah, exactly. So
Big brother's there.
yeah. But to some extent, I mean, it doesn't mean you can't have fun. There's plenty of ways to be able to have fun. And if the layover, like again, if the layover is long enough, you're more than happy to enjoy a few drinks here and there.
How do you I have this. I mean, I'm sure a ton of people have this. I guess you get used to it. But how do you maintain your health regimen, workout regimen, or productivity when you're constantly in new places? Because one thing that I struggle with for sure is that when I kind of have to be in like my space that I associate like psychologically and
Yeah.
mentally
Yeah.
with productivity. And like when I travel to a hotel, even like again, like here at my parents' house, like my associations being at my parents' house is not the same association as being at my house.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like I'm a kid here as opposed to a dad and and a homeowner. I feel
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
as opposed to being the man of the house. How do you maintain that, or do you or do you just like listen if you're flying 3 or 4 times a week and it's just it's off then, or what do you do?
It's a very good question. Since I was a little kid, I've always been very curious and very like resourceful for getting something done that I want to do. So the
Uh-huh.
first thing that I do is how I value my health and fitness is very high. Then from there, I work down on how am I going to obtain for me to fulfill that value. right?
Right.
That means if I'm in a hotel room and there's no gym at that hotel, can I move some furniture around? Can I do some plyometric work in that hotel room? Can I do something that's going to get me to that value of me fulfilling that?
Yeah.
So I've always had that since I was a little kid. I'm guessing the way I built discipline to that is by holding that so highly to me. It's very, very
Right.
important to me. But, the way that I do it is I used to work out so hard almost every day, even when I was flying, even when I was at home. And that kind of caught up to me. And I can't be doing so much hard, heavy training when I'm also operating an airplane, right?
Right.
You get tired. There's nights where maybe you don't get good enough sleep because you have kids running around the hotel hallway just waking you up every couple minutes. Certain things are outside of your control. So, as you go, and you learn that from experience. As I went through my airline career, I started amending and adjusting what I do on my layovers and what I do at home. So everything that is progressive overload, heavier lifting, or more like strenuous hard work is done at home. Because
Gotcha.
here I have more equipment, and here I have more control of what my rest looks like.
How many days a week are you home as opposed to traveling?
It depends. Sometimes you can be gone 4 nights.
Wow.
3 nights, 4 days. Sometimes you can be gone 2 nights, 3 days. Sometimes you're back the same day. It changes, man. It changes so much that you have to have a plan ready.
Yeah.
So you have to take a look at like how you look at your week, Sunday through Sunday, and you're like, okay, this week I'm going to fly this. So I'm going to work out these body parts on these off days. And I'm going to do mobility and flexibility on these days because I'm flying 8 hours this day. You can't just be like, oh, I'm flying 8 hours this day and now I'm going to go lift like a ton of weight. There's no way, man. First of all, mentally, you won't get there. You will be discouraged because of, dude, sitting in an airplane or just sitting in general all day is just
Tough.
only contributing to you continuing to sit and being lazy. Not in terms of like that you're lazy, you don't want to do anything. But the act of not moving doesn't make you productive.
Yeah.
The act of sitting makes you want to stay sitting. The act of lounging makes you only want to lounge. So now you go from 8 hours in a day sitting in an airplane in between 2 to 3 different flights. You get to your hotel room and you're like, oh, fuck, man, my hips are tight. My lower back is tight. Now I got to go lift. Your mind is like, no, we're not doing that. Like, and then sometimes you end up not doing anything at all.
Yeah.
But if you take that, so that's a very big gap to jump. And this is how I like to always do a metaphor. If instead of trying to jump that gap to get from like being really tired to doing a really hard workout, build a bridge that you can easily walk across.
So smart, dude. So smart.
And that bridge is, let's focus on undoing the sitting that we did today. Let's do hip mobility. Let's do something. And dude, before you know it, like I start off with hip mobility and then all of a sudden I run like a 5K. Like, what the fuck? Where did that come from? Things like that. You're building that bridge. Do you have to get to the other side and do an intense workout? No, but at least you're walking the bridge. You're getting there. Because if that intense workout is not today, it could be tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
You don't do you have an opportunity to get up and move around while you're flying or almost never?
Yeah, we could do like breaks where we use the bathroom and things like that, but it's not that much. You're supposed to go into the bathroom, come back, and go right back into the flight deck. It's not, it's not much time that we can lounge around, at least in narrow body airplanes like the 737 that I fly, but if you're in a 777 or you're in a Dreamliner where you're doing all these much longer flights, there are crew rest breaks. That means you get a rest break for about 2 to 3 hours. There, you're free to do what you want. You can go watch a movie. You can sleep. There's bunks in the airplane. You can stretch. You can do whatever you want.
That's
awesome.
Only what do you usually do?
I don't have those kind of breaks. I fly narrow body. No. I just.
Do you want to fly bigger? Would you go to that?
I would love to. I think it'll be a cool experience. Yeah. Yeah, I think it'd be awesome.
how does that work? Is that based on seniority? Is that just based on
Yeah,
like it is? It's just
yeah,
like,
yeah.
hey man, like you've been doing this for 2 years, you're not getting on a Dreamliner, man. You're doing this for ten
Exactly.
years, you get on.
Exactly. Oh yeah,
Oh
dude. It's
man.
gonna take so long for me to get there, but I mean, it's fine. It's all part of the process.
How long
Sometimes,
does it take? How long does it usually take to to make your way up there? Like where are you
I think
considered in your career as far as like a pilot?
well, I think
What?
I think it's gonna take me about like another 3 years to get
Wow.
to flying those airplanes. But it I'm enjoying so much being a captain on this airplane that I'm on right now. And
Yeah.
to me, I haven't really looked at my career of like, okay, what's next? Okay, what's next? Like I got to get to this, I got
You're
to
just
get to
enjoying
that.
it.
Dude, I'm just enjoying every single time, and I'm in either, when I was a first officer, when I was a captain, when I was a first officer again, now I'm a captain again. I mean, truly enjoying the moment just really truly makes me feel like this is just still a dream, man.
Totally.
There was a time where you do have to hustle. You do have to hustle to get, okay, you got to get your flight hours to become captain. Okay, you got to get your flight hours to get to the next airline that you want to go to. Those are
Right.
the times that you hustle. But I'm not always thinking like, oh man, I can't wait to fly like to all the Europe and all the stuff. Man, that time will come when it'll come. Right now, I'm having so much fun flying South America,
Dude, you have a great
Caribbean,
attitude,
domestic.
man.
So that's I think that's another thing that makes me enjoy my job so much.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? That's such a great attitude. There's something about I was actually I was talking about this because there was such a fundamental difference between I didn't know what I wanted to do with my entire life ever, right? For a long
Yeah.
time. There were always things I knew that I kind of spoke to me, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Um, and one thing I started doing a couple years ago, I started teaching. I love teaching, and this podcast is something else I love, right?
Cool.
And people ask me like, "Oh, how's it coming? How's it going along?" I'm like, man, like when you find something that you enjoy, you don't mind taking your time to get wherever you got to get because you're enjoying everything you do. And when you don't rush, like what we were talking about earlier, like full circle, when you're
Yep.
not rushing
Yep.
and when you're just letting the moment be the moment and when you're just experiencing what you're experiencing and also building and also growing and also learning and also getting experience, but you're loving what you do along the way, that's like that's ideal set. That's happiness, in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
Happiness,
I agree.
happiness to me is the feeling of having a big picture and knowing that you're doing what you can to get to that big picture and feeling like you're taking steps towards it. Because like I don't, because happiness is almost like if you ask me if I'm having a hard day, are you happy? I'm like, yeah, I am. It's a hard day,
Yeah.
but I'm a happy.
Yeah.
I'm happy. I love my life. I feel good. I'm a happy person. I feel meaningful and content. And but and then there are people that have comforts and that have that have what everyone else wants, but they don't feel like they're working towards achieving any kind of goal or any kind of dream or any kind of vision, and they're not happy, and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
so it's such a great attitude to be like, yeah, man, I'll fly a Dreamliner one day, but I'll get there, man, and like I like what I'm doing, like that's
Yeah.
just that's awesome. What's been some of your favorite places to visit so far?
Wow, man, that's every time I get asked that, it's pretty
It
tough. You
changes,
mean,
right? Well,
yeah?
let's talk
You
about the
mean,
people, or let's talk about people, like your favorite like types of people that you've seen,
okay,
and the favorite like I guess cities or topography, because I feel like those are two different questions.
for real? And also, uh, to add on to that, either for work or for pleasure, right? So
Ooh,
like,
right.
that's different too. I'll start off with work wise where I like going. I really love going to the DR, Dominican Republic. I love going
Hmm.
there. The people there I vibe with so much.
They're fun.
It's a great mixture between being professional and having fun at the same time. I think they're really great. In Puerto Rico as well, I get that same feeling.
Yeah.
Um, and the where I really and truly enjoy going to as well is Central America
Oh yeah.
because it's challenging. It's challenging to go there in terms of the runway layout, the airport layouts, mountains around. Dude, sometimes there's like these runways that are not completely straight. They're like downhill or they come down and then come back up. It's just challenging, and I love that. That makes the job so much more interesting. So I think like one of my favorite ones is also Guatemala. I like flying into
Oh yeah.
Guatemala. Yeah, it's a really interesting airport. Um, let's see.
What
I
about it's
love go.
interesting when you say these things are like when you say that these are like cool. Like I'm just because I don't even know how to even think about what you're thinking about. You know,
Okay,
like
so
yeah.
let me
Like?
try to visualize it for you. Okay, so you're coming in from the Gulf, right? And you're
Yeah.
starting to descend. Now you're starting to descend into like where mountains terrains are. The airport
Okay.
is located on a hill, maybe a hill that's like about like I can't remember the elevation. Let's call it like about maybe like 1,000 or 2,000 feet, right, from
Okay.
sea level. You
Okay.
have to come the way you're coming into it from the Gulf is in your landing looking towards the Gulf. So you have to somehow make a 180-degree turn somewhere.
No way.
But you can't just make a 180-degree anywhere because there's mountains and volcanoes all around. Obviously, there's called arrival charts and approach charts. So as long as you're following that chart in those airways, you're going to be fine. The thing is configuring and maneuvering the airplane to be
Mm-hmm.
at those specific spots at the
Cool.
specific speed at the specific configuration,
Nice.
and you start like you start preparing for this while you're still cruising. So way
Yeah.
before you start descending, you figure out like, okay, my landing capability is going to be this because we weigh this much. Is the runway wet? Is there a slope on the runway? What kind of density altitude do I have? Am I going to be landing
Yeah.
with a tailwind, with a headwind? All these things you're taking into consideration, and you're prepared mentally before you even start descending.
Awesome.
And then your goal descending is to be like, okay, I set up for this. This is how it's going to be done. And that's the goal, reaching those things. So, dude, as you're coming through, there may be clouds, there may not be clouds. You may pop out of clouds, and they all of a sudden, like the volcano's right in front of you, and you're hitting the point where you got to make a 180-degree turn. You're lining yourself with the runway. It could be raining, it could be not. Right before the runway, there's like a freaking waterfall, which looks so cool. Not a lot of people see it because it's kind of small, but you could definitely see it if you look good enough. And then you're coming in. You may have like all this wind from around the mountains that are just like pushing you left, right, with you, against you.
Wow.
Then the runway is not grooved, so the water puddles in the runway in Guatemala, which is a huge threat. You don't want to land where there's puddles of water. There could be hydroplaning. So now you're thinking about like, okay, what's my braking effectivity going to be? How am I going to do this? What kind of flap setting? All those things. It's nice when you think of all that and you execute it and you park the
Yeah.
airplane and you're like, fuck yeah, that was cool.
So it's
And
satisfying. It's like a
it's
challenge and it's
satisfying.
satisfying.
Correct. Versus like when you come back to Miami, I love Miami. I love landing here. I think it's the best freaking airport to land here. The controllers are super cool. The scenery is super awesome. But it's something that you already know. You already know which runway you're getting. You already know that it's long enough for you to land there. You know it's grooved. You know this. So you know all of it. You still plan for it, but it's
Yeah.
different because there's no mountains. There's no like winds that could be unexpected. There's thunderstorms that can pop here and there, but there's less of like threats than there is, for example, in like Guatemala or Medellin in Colombia. Landing
Yeah.
at night over there. Oh man, it's just fantastic. I love doing that. But let me get back to your original question, where I love the most going to. And I think my favorite countries have been, my wife and I have been to, I think like 40 together, 36,
Crazy.
37 or 40.
Can you
But
take
my
her on a
fa-
plane on a flight with you? Like if you're like have to go for
she's a
work?
pilot. She's a pilot too. So
Oh, no way.
Yeah, we both have the same
That's so
benefits.
cool.
Yeah. So she but she on herself has been to 70 countries. I've been to 56. Japan is my favorite. I think it's because like the culture, the education, the scenery, everything. Switzerland is amazing. Norway is amazing.
When you go to these places, you're not going for work. You're going
No.
for
These are
fun.
for fun. These are for fun. Yeah.
Right. And do you
Yeah.
get to travel? Do you get discounts on traveling? Do you get to travel for free? How does that work?
We have benefits. We have travel benefits. So we can fly anywhere we want as long as there's space. And if it's international, you pay the taxes. And then if you go on another airline, you pay like a heavily discounted rate that they give each other's, every airline supports each other's employees in terms of like, can you travel on us? If there's space, you pay this minimal fee. And
Cool.
that's mainly why we can fly and go everywhere so much for fun.
Right. And the 15-hour, how long did it take to get to Japan?
Shit, Japan. Where did we do Japan from? We did Japan from
Wow.
Dallas, so it was like, like 14, 15,
Yeah,
something like that.
is that hard for you? Or that doesn't bother you?
Man,
'Cause that would drive me crazy, man.
it's a good question. Sometimes it has, but I just sometimes like, dude, just drink 3 glasses of wine and pass out.
That's all you got to do.
I just pass out, dude. I just go to sleep, and sometimes, like the longest flight I did was Doha to Miami, and that was like 16 and change. Dude, I slept like 9 hours out of that thing. Then I watched like
Right.
two
But
to
that's
three more
still,
movies,
there you go.
and then boom, we're
Yeah.
home. And I'm like, wow, shit, that's not that bad. But man, if I had not slept for 9 hours, I'd be going nuts.
Yeah. So Japan, you
Bonkers.
thought Japan was awesome.
Loved it. I loved it.
You loved it.
I loved it. Yeah. I even got a tattoo on my leg. It's part of my sleeve.
Really?
Yeah. Because we hiked
That's
Mount
really cool.
Fuji. We hiked at the top of Mount Fuji. That was probably one of the hardest hikes we've done. We've done hiking all over the world. Probably have hundreds and hundreds of trails that we've done around the world. And Mount Fuji was probably one of the hardest ones.
Wow. What
Yeah.
was more challenging? What was more challenging about it?
Dude, I think it was because the preparation of me, I wasn't very well hydrated before we started.
I see.
And we went a day after landing. So we weren't hourly acclimated yet,
Hmm.
So I think a mixture of like a little bit of fatigue, not enough eating, not enough hydration, and then
But
do that.
the mountain itself was like if you did
It
that
was it was super super inclined, man. Like it got to a point where I'm like, I started cramping. I had to stop. My wife kept going. I don't know. She's like, once she gets going, she doesn't stop, dude. She's like,
yeah.
I'll wait for you at the top. I'm like,
Dude,
yeah,
what is the deal with why? I mean, I lived in Seattle for a year.
yeah,
I drove cross country to get there.
yeah. Oh shit,
Rainier
cool.
is awesome, man.
Yeah,
Have you been out west? Have you spent time out west?
a little bit. I've done some California stuff, but I have not explored Washington or Oregon or anything. I've flown into there, but I haven't
Oh,
explored. I know.
if you like hiking and you like nature, you got to be crazy not to spend time there.
Yeah, yeah,
It's incredible. There's something about the West Coast mountains that are so much more grandiose and so much more like literally awesome, awe-inspiring
yeah,
than I
yeah.
feel like the East Coast mountains. I don't know what it is. Someone mentioned to me
Right.
that they may have been that the East Coast is older and that the West Coast mountains are newer. So like as time went on, the mountains kind of like flattened out, which
Okay.
is why they appear a little longer. But what about the yeah? What about culturally? Your favorite places to like be with people? Because like I love, for example, like Dublin. I
Oh,
love
okay.
the Irish, dude. The Irish are awesome,
Yeah, yeah.
and but obviously that's not the most beautiful place I've ever been to in my entire life, But like
Right,
I love
right.
spending time there, like especially with people. What is something like when you go to these places? What's culturally like these places that stand out to you?
Man, that's a good question because I can vibe with a lot of different cultures because I'm so genuinely interested in learning
Hmm.
about them.
Yeah,
That like in Japan, I love how reserved they are to a certain extent and how they have so much education and respect for people
hmm,
versus going to a country where not necessarily that there's no respect, but they're a little bit more open, right?
yeah,
And a little bit more like going East Europe. That was kind of interesting to me because it took some time for me to get through people and start talking to
yeah,
them. But once I did, oh man, it was like, oh, okay, okay. There's like no, almost like I didn't. There's like no wall or anything. Kind of like
yeah.
to be able to for us to communicate. But it was very interesting because in the DR, like I mentioned before, it's instant. I mean, you get off the airplane and you're already joking around, being professional. It's like a great mixture of all that. So it's really hard for me to pick one place where I culturally will prefer, you know?
Right. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And I guess, yeah, it's a good point. About especially about the Eastern Europeans because they're like a rock, on the surface, but then it's usually like
Yeah.
after like
Yeah.
once you get past that rock, it's usually good humor and loyalty and like
Yeah.
uh and it's
Yeah.
cool how it manifests. My grandfather was from Poland and and he was a tough dude, and he had like no
Hmm.
problem, being an asshole if he wanted to be. But he had such a great sense of humor, and like,
Sure.
and you never, and I guess it's also, I guess, because these are like legitimately hard places to live, like
Right.
whether it's the
Right.
weather, whether it's the society, whatever it is, that you have to be able to like kind of flip that serious switch on immediately,
Hmm.
but like
Hmm.
I feel like you can't survive without that humor either, like you kind of need like a little bit of both of them in order to really be successful.
Completely agree, man. I think that like if everybody just stays that way, it actually is super miserable to live like that. So that you kind of need to start making some sort of at least good sense of humor, despite you know to be
Yeah.
able to like at least enjoy some things. But it was really interesting because in East Europe, I learned so much of the history, not only from the wars, but a lot of the communism stuff and a lot of like the straight thinking
Hmm.
and the manipulation that they had over the people. It's hard to break away from that. You still feel like whenever I would go to visit museums and things like that, damn man, you go in there and you're like, oh fuck, like you feel how tough that stuff was during the war and communism after that, and communism in some Eastern Europe places were until like the 60s or 50s. That's not that
Hmm.
long ago, you
No.
know. Um, and the one of the most interesting things about being able to travel the world is learning, obviously, the culture, but the history behind and all that, and you start to put some things together as to
Hmm.
personality and
Yeah.
history,
Yeah.
and it's just very interesting to know and understand because you can, let's say you're out in Miami now and you're somewhere on the beach, I don't know, you meet someone from, I don't know, Montenegro or
Ukraine, or
or
yeah.
Croatia or Ukraine or something like that. Now it's like you you have a deeper knowledge and a deeper level of understanding that your conversation with that person is more,
Sure.
I guess, like in depth. Maybe not in depth, but more like culturally aware.
Yeah, well, I think
So,
it isn't because you guys are really speaking more of you guys really are speaking the same language at a certain point. I mean, like, I mean,
mhm.
when you're talking to another pilot, you're speaking pilot language, like,
Yeah,
and even though we're using the same words, and even though you're both speaking English, you guys are
yeah,
speaking another language essentially. And
yeah,
when you have that kind of cultural awareness or that historical awareness, then you can like I think that's really what it is with a lot of people when you like, have a hard time like quote unquote making conversation or you're a good conversationalist. I think it just means that you're really good at being able to put your like be able to put yourself in someone else's perspective or understand where they're coming from and then be able to relate to them based on that.
correct. Yeah, completely.
But
I completely agree.
dude, what's it? So your wife is also a pilot.
Yeah.
Um, and when your dad warned you back in the day that you were gonna, that it was gonna be hard, you're gonna be traveling, missing things. Has that happened? Or how do you guys work? How do you guys maintain your relationship when you're traveling so much?
Yeah, so relationship in the industry is obviously a little bit easier in terms of like understanding each other's lifestyles and also like what you can do to manipulate scheduling to be able to work things out, right?
Right.
So, my wife, before she was a pilot, she was actually a flight attendant for like 5 6 years before she made the transition to wanting to be a pilot, and the scheduling was almost the same. So when we met 5 plus years ago, it was always a certain manipulation, mostly on her part, to change her scheduling to be able to match mine.
Hmm.
And that's because with her, she had a little bit like more of like a flexibility with her schedule rather than mine. Mine was a little bit more like locked in terms of the flying that they needed me to do. With her, she was able to trade trips and do things easier. So
Hmm.
it kind of accustomed to be her trading and changing her schedule around mine. And still to this day, like now as a captain, as a junior captain, I'm on call, so I can't really change my days, but she can. She's on call as well, but her company is smaller, so they're able to work with each person individually and be able to do these trades and things like that. So what we'll do is we will either try to match working days and match off days together. If
Hmm.
we can't match certain days off or working together, then if I get like a cool layover, I'll try to bring her, and she can come on
Right.
my layover and spend some time.
Cool.
With her, if she gets a certain layover, sometimes they're not like long enough, so sometimes it's not worth for me to like be able to go and spend more time flying than like in the actual layover. So, we just make it work on our off days, but we generally see each other like 15 days out of the month, 16 days out of the month. More?
Wow.
Yeah, like
More.
15. Yeah, like 15 to 20 days out of the month.
How often do you guys fly have the same like route that you're flying to the same place, or almost never?
No, not at all.
Never.
Never.
Where does she
No, but
go?
if you think about this, let's say somebody who works from 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Besides all the other stuff that they have to do, you only see your
Mm.
spouse or the person that you're with for a couple hours a day. Where
Sure.
my wife and I can be with each other the whole entire day because we're both off or
Yeah.
not being called 15 to 20 days a month, right?
Yeah.
So
It's awesome.
that in that sense it's worked out really well. It's not always like that though. And I'm sure it's going to change when we have kids.
Yeah.
That's going to be a whole different, ball game once we cross that line, but yeah, the amount of quality of time, even if it's less than somebody who's always at home, is still a little bit different.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
imagine for sure, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
listen. I think that's part of the beauty of a of relationships in general is that as long as you guys are speaking each other's languages, then it's okay. Then it's all great. Like my wife and I
Yeah.
spend an enormous amount of time together,
Nice.
or at least within the same vicinity of one another. I'm work from home and. She's working part time at the moment, but we just had a kid 2 months ago, so
Congrats,
she's been
man.
around. Thank
Wow.
you very much. Yeah, dude.
Wow.
This is number two. It's fucking wild, dude.
Wow.
Uh, I can't
Cool.
even begin to tell you, man. There's really no words, but
Yeah. Yeah.
um, except for chaos. But it's amazing. It's love and it's chaos. It's the two words that I would put there.
Yeah.
But yeah, we spend a lot of time together, and then but a lot of times we'll be like, even though we've been in the same house together for 10 hours, I barely spoke to her. I've been working, I've been doing a podcast, I go for a jog, I go, she has to run, she runs out, she goes to, she goes to see a patient or she goes to, practice, doing a couple of ultrasounds and then we
Yeah.
look at each other, we're like, we've been together all day, but I feel like I haven't seen you or spoken to you all day. So like, it's all about, I think it's all just about like the ability to communicate. That's what I've noticed is just like,
Completely. Yeah.
and communicating the hard stuff is also important because and figuring out how to phrase it. Like,
Yeah.
she said to like I've been traveling a bunch recently, back and forth to Florida, and I was in Israel and Amsterdam, and I had like 10 hours in Barcelona, which I thought was really cool.
Nice.
But and then she said to me, "She's like, I just feel." She's like, "I don't want to say this. Like, I don't want you. Like, I'm not trying to start a fight. I'm not trying to like get you upset. She's like, I just feel like we haven't like had much of a relationship recently, and like, just like, and just to preface with A, I'm not trying to fight,
Right.
and B, this is how I feel. What do you think about that? It was almost open ended, and
Yeah.
it was an invitation to collaborate again, as opposed to some kind of conflict. And I feel like that took time for us to figure out, but
Yeah.
since we have, it's been crucial.
That's good. And I mean, at least the line of communication is there, which is the hardest part, right? Sometimes what is it that I'm trying to communicate is hard, right? Because sometimes you can't even put into words what you're actually trying to,
Yeah,
what you're feeling,
yeah,
right? And it takes a certain level of, I guess, experience and time in a relationship to be able to communicate that with your partner. effectively, right? Because then
Yeah.
we misinterpret what the other person's trying to say, and then it goes south from there, right? But it happens. Like stuff like that
Yeah.
happens all the time.
Yeah.
But that's nice, though. It's nice that you guys at least you can able get that line of communication out and then work on it from there, which is huge, man. That's amazing.
Yeah, definitely. Are you a UFC fan with all your training and all your working out?
Yeah, no, I definitely love it. I got more into UFC within the past 2 years, so I don't really know
Me
like
too, dude.
all of
Yeah.
them. But me for martial arts, I love more of like the discipline, self defense aspect of it. I'm not in it to go in and fight people.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
for
not really
sure.
me. I just do it because I really love it, and if something were to ever happen, I at least have tools that I can help
Sure.
self
Sure.
defense. My family and I.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I've been, what do you, I think Taporia is going to murder Oliveira this
Think
weekend.
so? Shit,
And I'm
man.
a little sad about it, man. But
I
this
think
guy is,
I know.
yeah,
I love Oliveira. He's such a great team player. Like in terms of like respect to the other team and his own team and his opponent. I think it's wonderful. He's like one of the most loved people in the UFC. But Ilya, it's also man. I love that. I love the way that guy fights. I
dude, I
think he's also
love the way he
much.
fights.
I think he's much younger though than Oliveira.
He
I think there's
is,
an
and
age
he's gonna
difference.
knock his head off, dude. I really think so. I think because I heard him on Rogan, and he said he usually walks around, I think at like 185, and he was fighting at 145. He's like to not have to lose that extra 10 pounds. He goes, he goes, and maybe he's lying. Maybe maybe he's making it up. I don't know how
Yeah,
this kind of
yeah,
stuff works, dude.
yeah.
But I would love to see him win. I would love to see him be a what is it? Flyweight or featherweight,
Hmm.
lightweight and middleweight champ, dude. I
Yeah,
want him to beat
yeah.
everyone, man. I'm rooting for him.
I know. Me too. It's gonna be it's in June, right? June 28th or July?
No, this weekend.
It's this
The
weekend.
fight.
Oh, okay, yeah,
It's
June
this
28th.
weekend,
Yeah,
dude.
yeah, yeah.
Are you gonna be flying this weekend?
Yeah. Oh, I'm on call, so I don't know. Usually, like they let me know 2 to 3 hours before I gotta go fly. They're like, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what time I'm going. I just know that my schedule starts at 7 in the morning on certain days, and at 7 in the morning they can call me all the way up to 7 p.m. at night, and I
No
don't know where I'm
way.
going. Yeah, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know how many flights I'm doing. I don't know any of that, but yeah, they
Wow.
just
Does
tell
that
me.
change as you go through your career?
Yeah, as you get more senior, you start to be able to pick. Oh, okay, no longer am I on reserve. I can, fly 4 day trips if I want. Then 3 day
Right.
trips. So the most lucrative is like two day trips. And it's probably going to take me years, like probably like 10 years to get there.
Yeah, well, we'll get
But
there, man.
dude, I love being on call. Right, one the element of surprise, like where you're going, and a lot of the times it's easier trips than actual trips that you can bid for in the beginning of the month, and sometimes you end up doing trips that are awesome, and your seniority cannot hold it if you were to request it in the beginning of the month, right? Because let's
Yeah.
say I don't know, a captain called out sick, and it's all of a sudden
Yeah.
it's like a 24-hour Punta Cana layover. You're like, oh my god, I wouldn't seen this in
Yeah.
years. But guess what? I'm on call. They need me. Let's go.
Dude, such a freaking great attitude about it. Seriously, because it's because I could imagine a million different conversations with a million different people where they would be like, yeah, I wasn't sure, I wasn't sure where I was gonna go, and I was like, oh, I have to go back to there again. I have to go back to Colombia, and
Right, right.
I love the enthusiasm, dude. I think that that's what makes the difference between a successful, ultimately career or satisfying, life
Yeah.
than not is to have that kind of attitude.
I will say this though, the hard part about this scheduling in the attitude is knowing that like, man, you're doing something at home and you're busy and you don't think you're gonna get called, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden they call you and you're in the middle of a project, you're in the middle of something, and you're like, fuck, like I was
Yeah.
not expecting to get called, like damn it, right?
Yeah.
For like a minute, you're just like, come on, like why did they have to call out sick, or why did this, why did that, like are you kidding? And then like you process it and
You
you're
got to
like,
do, you
oh
got to
well,
do.
you got to do what you got to do, and like this trip is not too bad. And honestly, my wife is like, dude, you need to stop complaining. when you get a trip. But the thing is like if I wasn't busy with something else, I wouldn't, because like I'm a task person, man. I don't want to leave shit undone, right?
Yeah.
So like if I'm in the middle of something and they call me, I'm like, what bothers me is that I can't finish what I started. Not that they called
Yeah.
me. I'm just bothered that I'm interrupted.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you ever get called in the middle of like a fight? Like, if you ever like bickering with your wife or anything like that, do you get called and you're like, oh
No,
shit, I gotta go?
but I have been called in the middle of like MMA training.
Oh really?
Yeah. Oh
And you're
yeah,
like, oh
dude.
shit, I gotta
I'm
run.
like, I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm rolling with someone, and then my phone rings, and I'm like, oh shit, and then it's like, you got to go to Vegas, and I'm like, well, that's not the bad. I'll see you guys later.
Dude,
But yeah, couldn't finish the
do you
fight.
train
But I
on
have
the
to go to
road?
Vegas. Huh?
Do you train on the road? Like, do you roll on the road? Like, if you're
No.
traveling, if you go to Japan or anything like that, you don't like stop into place and train?
I would love to. I think that'll be pretty cool, but it just I would do it if I was traveling by myself.
That'd be really cool, dude.
Yeah.
It'd be really cool to like just like everywhere you like, like I love my craft beer. I'm into breweries, so I've been
Right.
to
Right.
breweries in like more than half the states and like in
Oh,
a
that's
bunch of
cool.
different countries.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like it'd be cool to like like okay, like I've rolled in like 50 different countries and like
Yeah.
I'm sure the cultures are so cool and different. That you can
Yeah.
probably learn
Yeah.
so much.
For sure. I would love to do that in Thailand. I would love to do like go to a Muay Thai gym and
Yeah, yeah. Have you been to Thailand?
No, not yet.
Not
Yeah,
yet.
that's in the
Get there,
works, man.
dude.
That's in the works.
That's in the works, dude. That's in the works.
Yeah.
Have you watched White Lotus? Are you a fan?
No, my wife is.
Oh yeah.
She loves
Too
that,
slow for
man.
you?
I'm never like the thing is like she watches that stuff when I go to MMA training and I'm always at MMA training like at night. So my stuff is at 7:30 p.m. and that's when she usually watches a lot of. So I miss out on a lot of shows and things like that.
Where's your gym? Where do you train?
I train in close to Fort Lauderdale. So I train in
Near
two. I
Guy?
train. I train in. No, maybe like still 15 minutes away, 15 to 20 minutes away from Guy. One place is in Weston. The jiu-jitsu place is in Western, which is Gracie behind. The other one's Premier Martial Arts. So Premier Martial Arts, they have a lot of schools in South Florida. They have
Yeah, I've heard the name.
Yeah, they have it in like Fort Lauderdale. I think it's like Oakland Park, Coconut Creek, all these different places. So that's pretty much where I go train, and it usually runs 7:30 to 9 p.m. So like I basically get
Nice.
home. We try to watch at least one episode of something, and then that's it. Right now we're watching one called Waterfront, which is like about like this family that owns a fishery in North Carolina, and then they get involved with like drug runs. And it looks
Oh,
pretty.
let's go. Yeah, I love that
It looks
kind
pretty
of stuff.
good. It looks pretty good.
What's
Yeah.
that on?
It's on Netflix. Yeah, it's called. I
gotta
think it's
check that
called
out.
Waterfront. Waterfront. or
I'm
something
looking
like
for a new show, dude. There's been a lot of great content out recently, but
I know.
I've been pounding all of it, dude. Dude, this is a good age for. This past year has a lot of good television, man. Last couple
I
of
know.
years,
that. Yeah. It's been really good.
it's been fun. It's been fun, dude.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the time, man. I appreciate you doing this. This is so much fun. It's so cool. I'd love to. We'll hang out. We'll hang out in person.
Yeah.
I'll meet you. You're welcome to come over. I'll meet you at Guy's gym. We'll get adjusted or roll maybe. And dude, this is so much fun. I hope to do this again, man. Thank you so much
Cool,
for coming
man.
on.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure talking with you and being able to share a little bit of aviation fitness and stuff like that. So thanks
We're
for
gonna
having
have
me on.
yeah, dude. I'm very excited about this episode, man. This is awesome. Thanks so
All
much.
right.
We'll be in touch.
Take care, brother. All
All
right.
right. Have a good day, brother. Bye.